Maybe you've heard people talk about the reading wars, but what are they and why do they still continue today? If you're new here, my name is Anna Geiger. I'm the author of Reach All Readers, creator of the Measured Mom website, and host of the Triple R Teaching podcast, and I'm currently pursuing my PhD in literacy. In today's video, we'll look at the history of the reading wars in America and look at where the state of reading instruction is in America today. At their core, the reading wars are a long-standing disagreement about the role of phonics in reading instruction. Whether phonics should be taught explicitly and systematically, or whether children should be taught in ways that emphasize whole words or context when figuring out what the page says. It might surprise you to know that the reading wars have been going on for hundreds of years. In the mid-1800s, Horace Mann, an education reformer, spoke out against explicit phonics instruction. He actually described letters as skeleton-shaped, bloodless, and ghostly apparitions. He promoted a whole word method that taught kids to read words by memorizing them by shape, rather than looking at the individual letters that spell the sounds. By the 1930s and 40s, programs like Dick and Jane repeated the most common high-frequency words in their stories. Oh, Jane, look, look! Jane, oh, look, look! Not surprisingly, there was a backlash. In the 1950s, Rudolf Flesch wrote an incendiary book called Why Johnny Can't Read. He argued that phonics instruction is the most natural way to teach reading. The book became a bestseller and the reading wars intensified. In the 1960s, Harvard researcher Jean Schall set out to settle the reading wars once and for all. She analyzed widely used basal programs and studied reading instruction in over 300 classrooms. Her conclusion was that systematic sequential phonics instruction, in other words, a code-based approach, makes the most sense for beginning readers. It improves word recognition in the early grades and even improves comprehension up to 4th grade. The first edition of her book, Learning to Read: The Great Debate, should have ended the reading wars, but they were just heating up. In the 1970s, whole language entered the scene. Proponents said that reading develops naturally, just like language, through rich literature and environmental print. One of the founders of whole language, Ken Goodman, called reading a psycholinguistic guessing game. In 1997, Congress stepped in, and they decided to convene a panel to take a look at what the research really has to say about how to teach reading. This was called the National Reading Panel. In the year 2000, the panel submitted its report, and you can get your hands on a copy. It's actually very easy to read, very practical. In it, the panel identified key elements for learning to read. Many people talk about these as the Big Five, even though that's not what the National Reading Panel called them. So these areas are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Certainly, the National Reading Panel could have investigated other areas that are important for learning to read, areas like oral language and writing, but those are the key areas represented in their report. Now, around the time the National Reading Panel began its report, so the late 90s, balanced literacy was born. Balanced literacy was an attempt to take the best from whole language and the best from phonics and put it together into one approach, a way to make both sides happy. It became immensely popular in the early 2000s. You may have heard of educators like Lucy Calkins, Irene Fountas, Gay-Sue Pinnell. These authors created many resources and books promoting the balanced literacy methods. Balanced literacy has no single agreed-upon definition. But when I talk about balanced literacy, I'm talking about the balanced literacy that was rooted in Ken Goodman's work. In practice, teachers typically use predictable, leveled books for beginning readers and encourage them to use the 3 cues to help them solve the words. So instead of teaching them initially to sound out words from left to right, students are encouraged to use context and pictures, and then also the phonics cue. But in practice, they may look like using the picture and then just the first letter of the word in those early pattern books. It's not that there's no phonics instruction in balanced literacy, but it's not the main focus at the beginning. I was a balanced literacy teacher. I used running records to place students in leveled books. I limited phonics to brief lessons, and I encouraged students to use the pictures and the context to solve the words. Many of my students appeared fluent in their predictable leveled books. When they struggled, I'm sorry to say I encouraged them to read more leveled books instead of dialing in to figure out what phonics skills we need to practice. Unfortunately, I didn't consider that something in my approach could have been wrong. Structured literacy is explicit, systematic, and cumulative. It emphasizes phonology, sound symbol correspondences, syllables, morphology, syntax, and semantics. The focus is on the skills. It provides the clarity and structure that many students need to become fluent readers. You may be wondering where the whole talk about the science of reading came in. Well, the science of reading is simply a name we use to describe the body of research that's been accumulated over decades. It's what the National Reading Panel was analyzing when they issued their report. The science of reading became part of our vernacular starting around the year 2017 when reporter Emily Hanford published the first of her audio documentaries with APM Reports. The first one was called Hard to Read. It came out in 2017, and then At a Loss for Words came out in 2019. Following that, there was another one, and then you might be familiar with the Sold a Story documentary series. These documentaries helped many teachers, like myself, realize that much of what we thought was backed by research actually wasn't. It opened the floodgates to lots of conversations on social media, on blogs, in Substacks, and we continue to talk now about the science of reading, what it is, and what it means for how we teach reading in the classroom. Today, the debate continues between balanced literacy and approaches that are actually backed by research. I want to be clear. About 40% of students will learn to read with balanced literacy, or pretty much any method that at least attempts to teach them to read. However, it's not good enough for the majority of students who need systematic, explicit instruction in phonics to learn to read. And that's why it's so important that we make it our mission to understand what the science of reading says so we can apply it to our teaching so all students can learn to read, both for those for whom learning to read is pretty easy and for those who need that explicit, systematic instruction. All students will benefit from a structured approach. Now, the science of reading isn't just about phonics. It addresses much more: oral language, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, writing. It's also important that as we teach according to the science of reading, we use insights from the science of learning. If you'd like to learn more about the science of reading and how to apply it to your teaching so all students become proficient readers, I recommend my book, Reach All Readers. In it, you'll find a history of the reading wars, clear chapters that walk you through the science of reading and practical ways to apply it. The reading wars have been with us for almost 2 centuries. The science of reading gives us clarity, a research base that we can use to make better decisions every day. You can find a link to my book and other resources below this video, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe.